Namaskar, I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. Welcome to Global Scan. In the next half an hour, we track all the major international news and developments of the week. President Donald Trump was acquitted from the impeachment trial by the Senate. Meanwhile, Pakistan mistreatment of minorities is exposed once again. Mega International Defence Expo in India takes place, and deadly locust attack threaten food security in African nations. And how does the international community tackle the challenge of coronavirus? All that and more. Let's begin with the headlines. Donald Trump acquitted in Senate impeachment trial after 2 weeks. Senate votes on 2 articles of impeachment, marking the inevitable and historic end to a bitterly fought impeachment trial. Countries across the globe on war footing following coronavirus outbreak. Death toll from the virus in mainland China rises, causes a downturn in Beijing's economy. Countries evacuate their citizens, but Pakistan government says students should not be evacuated from Wuhan as medical facilities back home do not meet the standards required. Evacuation only after repeated requests from students. US President Donald Trump delivers his 3rd annual State of the Union address, hails the great American comeback, slams Democratic plan to expand government-funded health insurance, speaks on economy and jobs. Pakistan government's indifferent attitude upsets its citizens. Hindu pilgrims from Islamabad say they don't want to return from India. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tells Pakistan situation of Hindus in the country deteriorating. Britons mark their departure from the European Union on January 31st. Exit from EU ends 47 years of union with Europe. Also draws a line under bitter and divisive 4-year wrangle over whether, when and how the country should cut its ties to the bloc. Let's begin with news from the Americas. President Donald Trump has been acquitted in the impeachment trial by the United States Senate, ending a bid to remove him from the White House, a contest that bitterly divided the nation. The Senate, with Republican majority, voted to acquit him 52 to 48 on charges of abuse of power and 53 to 47 votes on obstruction of Congress. Democrats charge President Trump in December with pressurizing Ukraine to investigate Democrat rival Joe Biden. Donald Trump was last year impeached by the House of Representatives and will now become the first impeached president to seek re-election.
Finally, the impeachment saga came to an end, bringing big relief to US President Donald Trump. He was acquitted on 5th February in his US Senate impeachment trial. These fellow Republicans rallied all through the 9 months to protect him. This businessman turned politician survived the 3rd presidential impeachment trial in US history, just like the other 2 impeached president in his turbulent presidency's darkest chapter. Now Trump plunges into an election season. Trump was acquitted largely along the party lines on 2 articles of impeachment approved by the Democratic-led House of Representatives on December 18. With the votes falling far short of 2/3 majority required in 100-seat Senate to remove him under the US Constitution. The Senate voted 52 to 48 to acquit him of abuse of power stemming from his request that Ukraine investigate political rival Joe Biden, a contender for Democratic nomination to face Trump in November 3 election. Republican Senator Mitt Romney joined the Democrats in voting to convict. No Democrat voted to acquit. The Senate then voted 53 to 47 to acquit him of obstruction of Congress by blocking witnesses and documents sought by the House. A conviction of either count would have elevated Vice President Mike Pence, another Republican, into the presidency. Romney joined the rest of the Republican senators in voting to acquit the obstruction charge. No Democrat voted to acquit. On each of the 2 charges, the senators voted one by one on the Senate floor, with the US Chief Justice John Roberts presiding. With Bureau Inputs, Global Scan Desk, DD India.
And President Donald Trump delivered the traditional State of the Union address. He boasted having led America's economic recovery and performance on important indicators of global trade and employment. However, what caught the attention of the world was the dramatic scene between President Trump and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. While Trump snubbed and refused a handshake by Pelosi, she returned the favor by tearing copies of his speech into pieces, standing right behind him.
A bitter feud between US President Donald Trump and top Democrat Nancy Pelosi was clearly witnessed. It boiled over at his State of the Union speech on Feb 4th. Trump snubbed her outstretched hand and Pelosi ripped apart a copy of his remark behind his back. Trump avoided the subject of his impeachment drama in an 80-minute speech, but the scars from the battle were evident, with fellow Republicans giving him standing ovations while rivals Democrats for the most part remained seated. During his speech, he slammed Democratic plan to expand to government-funded health insurance, amounted to a socialist takeover that would bankrupt the country, cut benefits for those who have them now, and provide care to illegal immigrants. Trump presented himself as a big improvement over Democratic President Barack Obama, whom he succeeded 3 years ago.
I am thrilled to report to you tonight that our economy is the best it has ever been. Our military is completely rebuilt, with its power being unmatched anywhere in the world, and it's not even close. Our borders are secure, our families are flourishing, our values are renewed, our pride is restored. And for all of these reasons, I say to the people of our great country and to the members of Congress, the state of our union is stronger than ever before. The unemployment rate is the lowest in over half a century. And very incredibly, the average unemployment rate under my administration is lower than any administration in the history of our country.
US President Trump used his State of the Union speech to lay out his vision for a second four-year term. He spoke on almost all issues, cleared the air. Global Scan Desk, DD India.
Some more updates from the American politics. 5-month-long process of picking up a challenger to Republican President Donald Trump began on February 4th in United States, Iowa. Former mayor of South Bend, Pete Buttigieg, took a narrow lead over other presidential hopefuls in Iowa caucuses, while former Vice President Joe Biden trailed badly in the 4th place with about 62% of the presence reporting. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders stood second in the first count of the votes, while U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren placed third in the first results. The data traditionally reported to determine the winner showed Buttigieg winning 26.9% of the votes, followed closely by Sanders, who had 25.1% of the votes. Elizabeth Warren got 18.3% and Biden got just 15.6% of the votes. Senator Amy Klobuchar was fifth at 12.6%. Speaking to the supporters in Laconia, New Hampshire, after the early results were announced, Buttigieg said that he had begun a race about a year ago with 4 staff members, no name recognition and no money, but with a big idea.
A campaign that started a year ago with 4 staff members, no name recognition, no money, just a big idea. A campaign that some said should have no business even making this attempt, has taken its place at the front of this race to replace the current president with a better vision for the future.
U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders hailed the overall performance by the Democrats in the much-awaited Iowa caucus and said they received more votes than any other candidate.
I'm very proud to tell you that last night in Iowa, we received more votes on the first and second round than any other candidate.
Let's now look at news coming in from Asia. And countries across the globe battle coronavirus outbreak and are evacuating their citizens. More details in this report.
Countries across the globe are on a war footing after the coronavirus outbreak. Death toll from the virus in mainland China has jumped by 73 to 563, with more than 28,000 confirmed infections there. The virus has shut down cities and factories in China, and disrupted global air travel. WHO said hundreds of experts will gather in Geneva on the 11th and 12th of February to try and find a way to battle the outbreak by speeding research into drugs and vaccines, and a multinational WHO-led team would also visit China. More patients have been sent to Hoshinchan, one of the 2 new hospitals dedicated to treating the coronavirus infected in Wuhan. Built in just 8 days, Hoshinchan, which is designed to have 1,000 beds, was the first of 2 coronavirus dedicated hospitals to be completed. It started taking in patients on the 3rd of February. The outbreak in Wuhan has even caused a downturn in China's economy. Investors are worried about the spread of the virus that wiped out more than $400 billion. Meanwhile, the Americans who left Wuhan from China aboard 2 planes arrived at the US military base in California. The US travelers on 2 State Department chartered flights will be quarantined for 14 days after landing. Russia also flew home its first group of 78 citizens from China's Wuhan, the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak. No infection was detected among the first group of returnees who landed in Tumen Airport. Thousands of passengers and crew on a cruise ship that docked in Hong Kong on Wednesday were kept on board while they were tested for coronavirus, as the city government said that all visitors from mainland China would be quarantined for 2 weeks. Thailand's Suvarnabhumi Airport gave out face masks and sanitizers to taxi drivers and other public transport drivers on the 3rd of February after a cab driver was infected with the coronavirus from a Chinese tourist. This was the first confirmed case of human-to-human transmission of the novel coronavirus within Thailand, as the country raised its total number of cases to 19, the second highest after China. Australian citizens and permanent residents were evacuated from Wuhan to Learmonth before being transferred to quarantine sites. It was only after seeing these countries that Pakistan decided to act. On Sunday, the government said that Pakistani students should not be evacuated from Wuhan as medical facilities back home do not meet the standards required to treat a patient diagnosed with coronavirus.
इस वक्त हमारा ये ख्याल है कि हमारे अपने प्यारों को जो कि चीन में हैं उनके हक में ये सबसे बेहतर है, और in the larger interest of the region, our country, world, कि हम उनको इस वक्त evacuate ना करें. यही आलमी इदारा सेहत भी कह रहा है, यही चीन की पॉलिसी भी है, और यही हमारी पॉलिसी भी है. हम चीन के साथ फुल सॉलिडारिटी में उनके साथ इसके ऊपर खड़े हुए हैं.
But the students kept requesting the government to evacuate them.
इस वक्त मैं चाइना के सिटी जिंगजू में मौजूद हूँ, जो वुहान से 1 आवर की ड्राइव पर है, और हमारे साथ यहाँ पर काफी सारे पाकिस्तानी मौजूद हैं. एटलीस्ट 300 से ज्यादा पाकिस्तानी हम लोगों के साथ यहाँ मौजूद हैं. हमारी सारिम बर्नी ट्रस्ट के बिहाफ पर पाकिस्तान गवर्नमेंट से ये अपील है कि प्लीज हमें जल्द से जल्द यहाँ से रेस्क्यू किया जाए, क्योंकि हम लोग यहाँ पर मेंटली टॉर्चर हो रहे हैं. ज्यादा हम यहाँ पर वेट नहीं कर सकते. प्लीज 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 हमें यहाँ से रेस्क्यू किया जाए. हमें यहाँ से जल्द बिल्कुल मेडिकल प्रोसेस के थ्रू हमें यहाँ से निकाला जाए, हमारा ब्लड टेस्ट किया जाए, और फिर हमें हमारे मुल्क पाकिस्तान पहुँचाया जाए. प्लीज हमें यहाँ से रेस्क्यू करें. हम आपसे तमाम पाकिस्तानियों के बिहाफ पर अपील करें कि हमें जल्द से जल्द चाइना से निकाला जाए.
Pakistani nationals stranded in coronavirus hit China started arriving home in Islamabad on Monday after Pakistan finally allowed 2 Chinese flights to land a day after it received special medical kits from Beijing to detect the deadly virus cases. Coronavirus has also hit Japan's tourism and the usually crowded tourist street of Asakuso in Tokyo. The virus is thought to have emerged late last year in a Wuhan market in illegally traded wildlife. It can cause pneumonia and spreads between people in droplets from coughs and sneezes. Global Scan Desk, DD India.
Now, while some 28,000 cases of coronavirus have been confirmed, most of them in China, we'll now look at how the international community, the way it has spread across the world in different countries, they are dealing with it. Let's talk about the immediate neighborhood. Thailand has 25 confirmed cases. Now, the numbers are increasing. We are referring to the WHO, World Health Organization figure of 6th of February. 138 persons have been evacuated by Thailand from China in order to treat them in their own country, their own countrymen. Thailand was also the first country, in fact, to have reported a confirmed infection outside of China as far as Singapore. Most number of cases, again referring to the WHO figures, confirmed outside of China is Singapore. 28 confirmed cases of coronavirus have been reported in Singapore, and nearly 100 people of Singapore, citizens of Singapore, have been evacuated by the country. Moving on, the food delivery service taxi drivers, people who come in contact with a lot of people, their work is such. A number of them have been quarantined if they were in any manner connected or related to the confirmed cases. So there's a large scale quarantine of taxi drivers and food suppliers. They've been compensated as well. Let's talk about Japan. 25 confirmed cases in China's neighborhood in Japan. This has been confirmed. WHO figures, we're talking about 6th of February figures. Over 700, so large scale evacuation has been done by the Japanese from China. 700 persons, Japanese people, have been evacuated from China, particularly from Wuhan, Hubei province, back home in Japan. Now, the country Japan has also barred entry of any foreign national from Wuhan or Hubei province, but that's the epicenter, remember, of coronavirus. The important breakthrough is that the gene sequence of the virus has been identified. Now, in development of a vaccine, identification of gene sequence in medical terms is a very crucial part. So Japanese scientists, medical experts have been able to do that. That does pave the way for in near future to develop some sort of a resistance for it. Let's talk about America. So from China to America, 12 confirmed cases have been identified. Now we know these are two biggest economies of the world, so there's a lot of air traffic that exists between the two countries. Over 700 persons also have been evacuated from China back to America in order to offer better treatment. American citizens have been evacuated from China. Also, screening of travelers coming in from Wuhan, from Hubei province, is been given particular emphasis. As I mentioned again, they are important trade partners, and there's huge air traffic that exists between US to China and vice versa, from China to the US. Quarantine stations have been put up. Contact tracking is taking place. Contact tracking basically is, if there's a confirmed case, all the people who may have come in contact with that person, their locality, their location, whether they're infected or not, that is being traced. Because of the influx of the traffic that I spoke about earlier, the strategy that America is following is not to stop infection, because that's not possible to stop all the people coming in from China, but to slow it down through the measures that we spoke about, different kind of screening. Now we're talking about India and Pakistan. Although the number of cases are not many, but it's an important comparison I'd like to talk about. 3 confirmed cases have been identified in India. All the 3 cases we know are stable at the moment. The patients are stable. They're in Kerala. 640 people, including a number of about 7 Maldivian citizens, have also been promptly evacuated by India. Close ties between the two administrations has made sure that the evacuation happened promptly. India has also set up state-of-the-art dedicated centers and quarantine stations to ensure that people who are evacuated, who are suspected of infection or confirmed infection, they are put in an isolation in such a manner that the infection has no chance of spreading. Also, the government of India has given advisory to all Indians to refrain from travelling to China, especially amidst the crisis of coronavirus. Step taken by India there. Let's talk about Pakistan. How is it handling the crisis? Although there's no confirmed case as of now, there is one suspected case in the Sindh province of Pakistan. But what made news was how Pakistan refused to evacuate its own citizens initially. It gave various reasons. It said that that's the right thing to do. China saying that. Also, they acknowledged that poor healthcare in their own country. The government hasn't worked on upgradation of the healthcare. They do not have the facility to tackle any patient, any confirmed cases in their own country, so it's better if the citizens stay there. Now, this is despite more than 500, about 300 to 500 Pakistanis, mostly students, have been trapped in Wuhan, the epicenter of coronavirus. But the government really gave a cold shoulder. They said, well, our citizens are safer in China than in their own country. Also, we saw in a story earlier that Pakistan students, in fact, have been crying for help. They gave out video messages saying that in view of their future and their health, they appeal to their own government to evacuate them, to rescue them from Wuhan. But for a long time, Pakistan administration chose to not pay heed to their demands. But Pakistan finally, under a lot of international pressure, also appealed from their own citizens that we showed earlier, has finally started the evacuation process this week. So those were some of the ways in which the international community is impacted and is dealing with the challenge of coronavirus. The plight of religious minorities in Pakistan has been exposed once again. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has also named Pakistan, saying that the situation of Hindus and other minorities in the country is deteriorating. He also condemned terrorists and violent extremists who target religious minorities in particular. Here's more.
Pakistan government's indifferent attitude has upset its citizens. From youth to elderly to pilgrims, all are unhappy with Imran Khan's government. A fresh batch of Hindu pilgrims that came to India from Pakistan on February 3rd said they do not want to return to Pakistan even after their visa expires. These pilgrims had come to visit Haridwar in Uttarakhand.
25 डेज की मेरी वीज़ा है। हरिद्वार में स्नान करके फिर मैं सोचूंगा कि कहाँ रहना है कहाँ नहीं रहना।
पाकिस्तान तो अच्छा है, वो भी एक दिन हिंदुस्तान था, मगर वो अभी मुसलमानों का देश हो गया। ये हिंदुस्तान है तो यहाँ पर हिंदू का रहना सही है, बस यही सोच कर आए हैं यहाँ पर।
Even US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has named Pakistan, saying situation of Hindus in the country is deteriorating.
In the world today live where they cannot practice their faith freely. We condemn terrorists and violent extremists who target religious minorities, whether they are Yazidis in Iraq, Hindus in Pakistan, Christians in northeast Nigeria, or Muslims in Burma. We condemn blasphemy and apostasy, laws that criminalize matters of the soul. And we condemn the Chinese Communist Party's hostility to all faiths.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government recently passed Citizenship Amendment Act, which added a provision for fast-tracking citizenship to persecuted religious minorities from Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan who took refuge in India before 2015. With Bureau Inputs, Global Scan Desk, DD India.
Let's now move on to news from Europe. The UK formally quit the European Union last week, closing the chapter on nearly half a century of integration with its European neighbours as it begins to chart a new and uncertain course in the world. Brexit was finally done after 4 years of nearly unprecedented political chaos triggered by the 2016 Brexit referendum. It marks a watershed moment for both the UK and the EU. While a challenging road and detailed negotiations lie ahead for both the parties, for Britain, it was a moment of celebration.
There were tears of joy as the countdown to Brexit finally came to an end late on 31st of January. Singing patriotic songs and waving the Union Jack flags, more than 5,000 pro-Brexit Britons marked their departure from the European Union on Parliament Square, with fireworks and cheering in the heart of the capital. Penelope Smallbourne, once a Brexit Party hopeful, broke into tears as the bells chimed Britain's departure.
We are now a free and independent country once again. We can make our own laws. We can levy our own taxes. We can make our country safe again. It's wonderful.
Alan Gooding, a 72-year-old novelist and pro-Brexit supporter, cheered and whistled as people around him sang.
It's been such a long time coming, and at last we've got rid of them. I can't believe how we put up with Europe for so long as we did. All the insults they flung at us, our Prime Minister, our country, our Queen, now we're rid of them. That's it, that's what it's all about.
The crowd spilled into the surrounding streets where many defied a ban on alcohol despite a heavy police presence. Others lit flares near the statue of the former British leader Winston Churchill as Rule Britannia played. Britain's 11 o'clock exit from the EU ends 47 years of union with Europe. It also draws a line under a bitter and divisive 4-year wrangle over whether, when and how the country should cut its ties to the bloc. Global Scan Desk, DD India.
So Brexit is done, finally. Let's not talk about news from Africa. Now, swarms of desert locusts that have spread across East Africa could soon threaten the widespread food production as they continue to move to more areas. But this is what the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, had to say. The locusts, first sighted in Somalia in December, have since spread to Kenya and Ethiopia and are now within 200 kilometers of Uganda and South Sudan. The hungry swarms threaten to exacerbate the food insecurity in the region, where up to 25 million people are reeling from 3 consecutive years of droughts and floods. They say, this is what the aid agencies had to say. Earlier, Somalia declared the locust invasion a national emergency. Authorities are responding with aerial spraying of pesticides, but experts say that the scale of infestation is beyond local capacity, as desert locusts can travel to up to 150 kilometers in a day and multiply at a terrifying speed. And Pakistan is facing a similar challenge. Let's now take a look at all the other important happenings around the world in Speed News.
Clashes broke out in Baghdad as protesters rallied against Iraq's newly appointed Prime Minister Mohammad Tawfiq Alawi. Demonstrators marched through the capital chanting "Alawi is rejected by the people." Protesters have demanded any new Iraqi Prime Minister must be independent of established political parties and approved by demonstrators. The United Nations has estimated over 520,000 Syrians as displaced in its latest report. The displaced Syrians include mostly women and children who have fled the ongoing fighting in the northern part of the country since early December. United Nations further said that another 280,000 are at imminent risk of being displaced if hostilities continue. In Australia, the parliament was suspended on 4th of February to honour the victims of a national bushfire crisis. Prime Minister Scott Morrison described the Australian bushfire season as Black Summer and paid his tribute to the victims of the bushfires. The bushfires have killed 33 people, an estimated 1 billion native animals, and destroyed about 12 million hectares across the country since September last year. Around 38 were killed in eastern Turkey, including rescuers in 2 avalanches, one after another, that buried many under the snow. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said 33 people died when the second avalanche hit, while they were searching for 2 more victims of the first snow slip, which killed 5 people after rescuing 8 others. Family members of the victims held a mourning at a military ceremony on Thursday. In New Zealand, flash floods and incessant torrential rains in South Island left several hundred tourists stranded and forced many residents to evacuate their homes this week. Rescue teams airlifted some of the nearly 500 stranded tourists in the remote Milford Sound as rivers flooded and power supply was cut in many areas. Civil Defence declared a state of emergency in the area and asked people in low-lying areas to evacuate immediately. Global Scan Desk, DD India.
Time now for showbiz and all that happened in the world of art and entertainment.
The British Academy of Film and Television Arts Awards, popularly known as BAFTA, kicked off at London's Royal Albert Hall. World War I drama 1917 emerged as the big winner of the night with 7 awards in its kitty, including Best Picture and Best Director for Sam Mendes. The film was also honoured in the Outstanding British Film, Sound, Production Design, Cinematography and Special Visual Effects categories.
Last man standing.
Britain's biggest movie honour, the BAFTA, was also handed over to Joker and Judy. Philip Todd's dark drama Joker won 3 awards, including lead actor for Joaquin Phoenix, while Renee Zellweger picked up the lead actress award for her depiction of Judy Garland in Judy. Brad Pitt claimed his BAFTA for Best Supporting Actor in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, while Laura Dern won Best Supporting Actress for her portrayal of a fearless and witty divorce lawyer in Marriage Story. South Korean director Bong Joon-ho's satire Parasite again won hearts and became the best film in foreign language category, while Netflix's animated holiday movie Cloth won best film in the animated category. Amid glitz and glamour, the ceremony also witnessed a round of disappointments as many blamed it for its lack of diversity among nominees. Global Scan Desk, DD India.
Now, one of the most famous faces in the world peers out from the mosaic of Rubik's Cubes in Paris auction house, where a version of Mona Lisa will be up for bids later in the month. The 2005 work by French urban artist Invader is made of some 330 blocks of the iconic puzzle game and goes under the hammer on 23rd of February. We leave you here with Mona Lisa's mysterious smile. Goodbye for now.